I asked when the wedding is, and my daughter-in-law said, wise said, we got married yesterday. Ah, my dear, let me tell you how deep those 3 years cut into my life. You see, when my son Max first married Lena, I thought it was my duty, as a mother, as a woman who had already walked the long road of life, to ease their burdens. They were young, starting out, full said, we out, andal of dreams, but with pockets as empty as their refrigerator. I thought, well, I've lived long enough to know what struggle feels like. Let me carry it for them, just until they find their footing. So it began little by little. Their rent was $500 a month, not much perhaps in the grand scheme of things, but for them it was always too much. I remember the first time Lena called me, her voice trembling, saying, Renate, we're behind this month. The landlord is threatening us. Could you help just this once? Just this once. Those words became the thread tying me down for the next 3 years. Every month after that, like clockwork, I sent the money, $500 gone from my account before I even thought about myself. But it didn't stop at rent, no. There was always something else. The fridge is empty, Lena would say, and like the fool I was, I would walk through the aisles of the supermarket, it with my own cart full, not for me, but for them. Bags of groceries that I carried with my aching arms, low out, and arms wear, dead into their refrigerator, while my own kitchen sometimes held only beans and rice. I told myself I didn't mind. After all, what's a little hunger compared to seeing your child safe and fed? Furniture, oh, don't even get me started. Their apartment looked bare, and of course, Lena wanted a sofa, a dining table, Curar's wear table, and Taines that matched. We can't afford it, Mom. Max would say with a heavy sigh, and my heart would crack open. So I paid, one piece at a time, until their little place looked warm and cozy, while my own house grew older, paint peeling, rugtable and peeling, ands worn thin. But still I smiled, convincing myself it was worth it. Then came the emergencies. Always an emergency. One month it was the car breaking down. Another month it was Lena needing money for medicine. Another time they said the air conditioner had broken in the middle of summer heat, and how could I let them suffer like that? I pulled out my checkbook so often that the pen marks cut grooves into the paper. It's just money, I would whisper to myself, but they're my family. Over time, I stopped counting, though my savings account told the story every month. It wasn't until I sat down, pencil in hand, and added it all up that the number slapped me across the face. $33,400. Do you hear me, dear? $33,400. That's not pocket change. That was my retirement cushion, the money my late husband left so I could live in peace during my last years. Piece by piece, bill by bill, I bled it all out for them. And what did I receive in return? Not gratitude, not love, not even the smallest gesture of appreciation. No, I became invisible, an invisible wallet that always opened, never closed. I was the silent provider in the background, financing their life while mine stood still. I didn't buy Miss Beeling and haven't bought Alf a new dress in years. I skipped the salon. I stopped going on little trips with friends. Every time I thought about spending on myself, a voice in my head said, no, Lena and Max might need it. 3 years of sacrifice, and not once did they say, Mom, you've done enough. Let us handle it now. Not once did they bring me flowers or cook me a meal to say thank you. Instead, they grew comfortable, entitled, as though my sacrifices were not gifts, Buhaven bought gifts, but obligations carved in stone. I gave them so much, my dears, that I almost lost myself. My days revolved around their needs. My joy became their comfort. My identity shrank to the size of my bank account. And still I kept telling myself it's worth it, because one day they will look back and see all I did. One day they will remember my love, but you know what hurts the most. The day I learned I was not a special person, that despite the $33,000, despite the sacrifices, despite the sleepless nights worrying about their bills, I was not important enough to stand beside them at their wedding. That was the knife to my chest. That was the moment I realized that all those years of giving had bought me nothing but humiliation. So yes, I sacrificed for 3 years. I carried them on my back, poured my life savings into their comfort, and denied myself the peace I had earned after a lifetime of work. $33,400 may be a number on paper, but for me it was 3 years of tears, hunger, loneliness, and a foolish hope that if I gave enough they would love me back. And now when I look back I wonder, was it love I gave them, or was it a rope I tied around my own neck? Because sacrifice, my dear, without respect, without gratitude, becomes nothing more than self-destruction. Ah, my dear, that day is etched in my heart like a scar that will never fade. You see, for months I had been waiting for my son Max's wedding. I thought, as any mother would, that I would be there, dressed in the pale pink gown I had bought just for the occasion, smiling proudly as he said his vows. I had told my sister in Chicago the date was coming soon, IH, gifts but soon, and I'd cleaned every corner of my house, thinking maybe after the ceremony they would stop by so we could celebrate together. I even tucked away $1,000 in an envelope, ready to hand to them as a wedding gift from a mother who had given everything she could. But one afternoon, as I stood there with the phone in my hand, expecting to hear details of the big day, the world around me seemed to shatter into pieces. Lena looked at me straight in the eyes with that sly little smile of hers and said the words I will never forget. "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people, special people." That was her choice of words. Do you know how those words feel when they hit you, coming from the mouth of the woman who has lived off your sacrifices? They were like ice water thrown over my soul. My hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped the phone. My son sat there, his eyes cast downward, unable to meet mine. Not a word of comfort, not an explanation, nothing. Just silence while his wife smirked on the sofa I had bought for them with my own money. My dear, I stood frozen, staring at them as the realization sank in. For 3 years I had given them everything. Rent paid, groceries stocked, furniture provided, evesoon and provided, and in money for the very dress she wore on her wedding day. $800 I had handed her just weeks before, not knowing it was for a ceremony I was never meant to see. I had imagined myself in those wedding photos, standing proudly beside my son and his bride. Instead, when the photos appeared on social media, there were her parents, her siblings, and provided, and siblings, and glasses of champagne raised high, smiling like royalty. In me, I wasn't there. My chair at that table was empty. My face in those memories was erased. I had bought a pair of new shoes, thinking of how nice they would look as I walked down the aisle behind my son. I had practiced fixing my hair in the mirror, hoping to look my best for that day. I had even dreamed of dancing with Max, just one slow song where he would hug me close and whisper, "Thank you, Mom." But none of that happened. The dress I bought still hangs in my closet, tags untouched, mocking me each time I pass it. And the words, "only special people," rang in my ears like a cruel melody. Who were those special people? Her family. Her friends, everyone but me, the woman who had carried Max in her body for 9 months, the woman raised him alone after his father died, the woman who worked long hours, sometimes skipping meals, just to make sure he never went without. If that does not make a person special, then tell me, my dear, what does? I cannot tell you how deep that cut went. It was not just being excluded from a party. No, it was being told that my love, my sacrifices, and very existence meant nothing. That despite all I had done, I was not worthy to stand at the side of my only son on the most important day of his life. Do you know what betrayal feels like? It is not loud, sacrifices and loud. It does not scream. It is quiet, like a knife slipping between your ribs when you least expect it. That is how I felt, stabbed by my own flesh and blood, not with anger, but with indifference, because Max didn't even fight for me. He didn't say Mom should be there. He didn't call to tell me beforehand. He just let it happen, as though my presence was a burden too heavy for them to carry. And then, as if to twist the knife, Lena settled herself on my sofa in my living room as though nothing had happened. She had the audacity to smile while I stood there, my dreams of being part of their joy crumbling into dust. That night, when I finally went to bed, I lay staring at the ceiling, and the tears wouldn't stop. I thought of the little boy Max used to be, running into my arms after school, telling me I was the best mom in the world. I thought of the birthday cakes I baked for him, the scraped knees I kissed and loud, kissed, and the nights I stayed awake just to make sure he was warm. I thought of the man he had become, sitting quietly while his wife told me I wasn't special. Do you see, my dear, why those words haunt me? Because in that moment I realized something terrible. To them, my love was invisible. My sacrifices meant nothing. All the money, all the care, all the years. They had turned me into nothing more than a wallet that breathed. A wallet does not attend weddings. A wallet does not sit at the family table. A wallet, it does not get called special, and from that day on a coldness grew inside me. A part of me began to wake up, to see clearly what I had refused to see for years. I was not a mother to them any more. I was a resource, and once the resource stopped being convenient, they pushed me aside. So when I tell you they married without me, saying only special people were invited, understand this. It was not just a wedding I missed. It was the moment I realized my own son no longer saw me as his mother Beau, is nothing at all. Ah, my dear, let me tell you about the day the scales finally fell from my eyes. After all those years of giving, every month like clockwork, the $5, 100 rent, the groceries, the furniture, the medicine. I thought I had no strength left to resist them. I had become so used to living for their needs that I barely remembered what it felt like to live for myself. But then came that call, the call that changed everything. It was exactly 7 days after I found out I wasn't special enough to attend my own son's wedding. My humiliation was still fresh, like a bruise that hurt with every breath. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm coffee when the phone rang. The screen showed Lena's name. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was an apology. Maybe she had realized how cruel her words had been. Maybe she wanted to make peace. I answered, and her voice came through, trembling, but not from remorse. No, it was the tremble of desperation. Renate. She said, the rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us. If we don't pay this week, he says he'll kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer. Forgot, can you imagine, as if it was my job, my obligation, to keep 2 grown adults afloat. As if the $500 wasn't a gift but a debt I owed them. My hands tightened around the phone, and for a moment I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind her of the dress I had bought, the refrigerator I had filled, and the thousands I had drained from my savings. But instead, something inside me shifted. A calm, icy clarity settled over me. I let the silence stretch long enough that she must have thought the coal had dropped. And then I said the words that had been burning inside me since the wedding. Lena, didn't I warn you? I only help special people. Oh, the silence that followed. I could hear her breathing quick and shallow like a cornered animal. She stammered, Renate, I don't understand. We were always special to you. You've always said I was like a daughter. Lies, child, all lies. She had only ever used those sweet words when she wanted something. I repeated myself, slow and steady, so she couldn't mistake me. I only help special people. And with that, I hung up. Do you know what that moment felt like? It felt as though I had cut the strings of a heavy puppet show I had been dancing in for years. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling, but for the first time in so long, it wasn't from fear, it was from power. I had finally said no. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed replaying all the times I had run to the bank to save them, all the times I had eaten less so they could eat more, and all the tears I had shed alone while they lived comfortably on my dime. And I realized the truth. They had never seen me as a mother to be cherished. They had seen me as a resource, a bottomless well they could draw from whenever life got inconvenient. The next morning I acted. I walked into the bank, shoulders straight, head high, and told Mr. Klein, the manager, I want every automatic transfer to my son and daughter, in-law canceled, and I want protections on my accounts. No one but me touches my money again. He looked at me with surprise. After 3 years, those transfers had become as regular as the sunrise. But he nodded and began typing. As I signed the papers, I felt lighter, as though I had been carrying a sack of stones on my back and had finally put it down. That money, the money my late husband had worked so hard to leave me, was mine again, mine to use for my peace, my joy, and my old age, not theirs to squander. Of course, my phone didn't stop ringing that day. Max called, Lena called, then Max again. Texts popped up one after another. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. For the first time in years, I didn't answer. I deleted the messages without even reading the rest. My dear, I cannot describe the freedom of drinking my morning coffee the next day without worrying about their bills, to take a walk in the park, not to fetch groceries for them, but simply because I wanted to feel the sun on my face. That single sentence, "I only help special people," wasn't just a refusal. It was a declaration that I mattered. That my life, my money, and my dignity were no longer theirs to control. And though I knew it wouldn't end there, though I knew they would fight and claw to get their hands back on my purse strings, I also knew one thing with absolute certainty. I had closed the door on being their victim. From that day forward, the transfers stopped, the begging began, and so did my freedom. Ah, my dear, let me tell you about the darkest day in my own home. You see, there is a certain kind of pain that comes when strangers wrong you, but when it is your own flesh and blood. That pain pierces deeper than any knife. It was an ordinary afternoon. I had just come back from the bank, feeling lighter, free even, after finally cutting off the automatic transfers. For the first time in years, I had walked with my head held high, no longer dragging behind me the invisible chains of obligation. I remember humming a little tune as I climbed my porch steps. But when I opened the door, my heart nearly stopped. There they were, Max, my son, my own flesh, sitting on my sofa with his head in his hands. Lena was pacing back and forth like a restless cat. And at my dining table, a stranger, a man in a gray suit with cold eyes, going through my personal papers as though my life were nothing more than files to be shuffled. For a moment, I thought I had stepped into the wrong house. But no, this was my home, my safe place, and yet they had invaded it as if I were the intruder. What is happening here? I asked, my voice louder and firmer than I expected. All three of them looked at me, not with shame, not even with surprise, but with the arrogance of people who believed they had the right to be there. Lena spoke first, her voice dripping with false concern. "Renate, thank goodness you're here. We need to talk. This is Mr. Fisher, the lawyer we consulted about your situation." My situation, those words rattled around my head. What situation? I was fine, better than fine. For the first time in years, I was thinking clearly. Max finally lifted his face, and those eyes that had once shone with innocence now carried only panic. "Mom, we went to the bank. They told us you canceled the transfers and blocked us from your accounts. We don't understand why you do this." And then the lawyer, Mr. Fisher, stepped toward me with his outstretched hand, pretending politeness. "Mrs. Richter, I am here because your children are worried about your mental health. They've noticed concerning behavior, and they asked me to evaluate the situation. If necessary, we can arrange a guardianship so your finances are properly managed. Can you imagine, dear?" In my own house, with my own son watching silently, this stranger suggested I was too confused to handle my own affairs. They were plotting to declare me incompetent, to strip me of my independence, to make me a prisoner in my own life. I did not take his hand. Instead, I walked straight to my table, gathered up the documents he had been pawing through, and held them close to my chest. "These are my private papers," I said, my voice steady. "You have no right to touch them." Max spoke then, but his tone was the one I had come to dread, a condescending song voice as if I were a child who couldn't understand. "Mom, we're worried about you. First you cut us off without warning, then you don't answer our calls. You're not yourself. We just want to help." And then Lena came closer, her face twisted into that fake tenderness she always wore when she needed something. "Renate, honey, at your age, loneliness can play tricks on the mind. Confusion is normal. We're only trying to protect you." Confusion. Oh, that word rang in my ears like a siren. That was their weapon. That was how they would justify stealing what little security I had left. They weren't here out of love. They were here to declare me senile and seize control of everything I had worked for. But I, dear, was not confused. For the first time in years, I was crystal clear. I am not confused. I said, standing tall, I am more certain than I have ever been. And you, I pointed to the lawyer, are going to leave my house, all of you. The lawyer tried to reason with me in that smooth, patronizing voice. Mrs. Richter, your children have rights. If they believe your judgment is impaired, they can petition a court for guardianship. Lena's mask slipped then. She snapped. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We're just trying to speed up the process. There it was. The truth, naked and ugly. To them, I was already gone. Just an obstacle between them and money. I looked at Max then, my son, the boy I raised alone, the boy who once clung to me when he had nightmares, and all I saw was a 35-year-old man who wanted his mother declared incompetent so he could live comfortably. My heart broke in that moment, but it also hardened out. I said firmly, all of you out of my house. Max stood, his face red with anger. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. Rent, car payments, and bills you co-signed. You can't just abandon us like this. I lifted my chin. Who says I can't? For years, I paid rent on a house I never lived in. I filled a refrigerator in a home where I wasn't welcome. I financed a life where there was no place for me. Enough. The lawyer laid a folder on my table, suggesting I sign a power of attorney to give Max control. Without even glancing inside, I picked it up and tossed it straight into the trash. The only transition happening here is yours out my front door. Their faces burned with fury, but I did not flinch. For the first time in years, it was they who trembled, not me. That day, my dear, I learned something powerful. Love can be faked, concern can be staged, but greed always shows its true face in the end. And when it does, you must be strong enough to stand your ground, even if it means standing alone. And so I did. I threw them out, locked the door, and claimed my home again. Not just the four walls, but the dignity that had been stolen from me. Ah, child, let me tell you, the day I decided to take back control of my life was the day I stopped being their victim and became my own protector. For so long I had been running to the bank, signing checks, transferring money, opening my doors wide for Max and Lena, and trusting that love would one day come in return. But love never came, only demands. And when I saw them with that lawyer in my own house, rifling through my papers, calling me confused, I knew something had to change. The very next morning I put on my best coat, the one I hadn't worn in years, and marched myself to the office of Mr. Weber, a lawyer I had known long ago when I dealt with my late husband's will. My hands were trembling as I explained everything, the years of financial support, the secret wedding, the rent money, the break-in with a lawyer, and the threats to declare me incompetent. Mr. Weber listened quietly, his face growing darker with each word. When I finished, he leaned forward and said, Mrs. Richter, what your son and daughter-in-law are doing is not just cruel, it's a crime. It's called elder financial abuse, but don't you worry. We will put protections in place. For the first time in weeks, I felt a bit of air return to my lungs. Someone was finally on my side. Together, we spent hours going through my bank records. He helped me cancel every automatic transfer, close the accounts that Max and Lena knew about, and open a new one in a different bank where they had no connections. From now on, he said firmly, your money belongs only to you. No one else touches it. Those words were like medicine to my soul. I almost cried with relief. But money was only part of it. My home, my sanctuary, had been violated. They had keys they had walked in as if it was theirs, and I could never again rest easy knowing they might return. So I went straight to the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Summer, knew me well. He raised his eyebrows when I told him, I need new locks, the best ones you have. I could see the questions in his eyes. After all, he had seen me buy screws and paint and little things for Max and Lena's apartment over the years. But this time I was buying for myself. It's time I secure my own home. I told him, and he gave me a respectful nod. His son Ethan, who worked with security systems, happened to be there that day, as if fate had placed him in my path. Mrs. Richter. He said kindly, I can install cameras for you, modern ones. You'll be able to see who comes to your door even on your phone. Ah, child, the irony of it nearly made me laugh. Imagine having to protect myself from my own son. But I did not hesitate. Yes, I told him, install everything, every corner, every door. If they come again, I want to see them before they even step inside. That night, I sat at my kitchen table while the locksmith changed my locks. The sound of his tools clicking and turning was like music to my ears. With every new bolt, with every turn of the screwdriver, I felt my independence returning. When he handed me the new keys, cold and shiny in my palm, I felt like I was holding my life again. The next day, Ethan installed the cameras. He walked me through the system, showing me how I could check the front porch, the backyard, and even the side windows. If anyone tries to break in, he explained, the police will be notified immediately. As I watched the little red lights blink to life, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: safety. Not the false safety of having my son nearby, but real safety, the kind that comes from knowing I was finally standing up for myself. When evening fell, I sat in my living room, staring at the screen that showed every corner of my property. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe without fear. The walls of my house felt solid again. No one, not even Max, could walk in uninvited anymore. You see, child, hiring that lawyer, securing my accounts, changing my locks, and installing those cameras, those were not just practical steps, they were symbols. They said, I am no longer weak, I am no longer your victim. This is my money, my house, my life. And though the road ahead was still full of battles, from that moment on I knew one thing for certain. They could scheme, they could threaten, they could even take me to court, but they would never again control me. I had drawn the line, and this time it was carved in stone. Ah, my dear, if you thought being excluded from my son's wedding was the worst thing that ever happened to me, then you have not yet heard of the day my own flesh and blood dragged me to court, trying to brand me as incompetent and old. Confused woman who couldn't manage her own life. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can see the courtroom, the high ceilings, the heavy wooden benches, and the cold eyes of the people who once called me family. It all began after I cut off the transfers, changed the locks, and hired my lawyer, Mr. Weber. I knew Max and Lena wouldn't take it kindly, but I never imagined they'd sink so low. At first, it was calls and texts, all filled with guilt and threats. Mom, we need you. You can't just abandon us. But when they saw I wasn't bending, they sharpened their knives. One morning, Mr. Weber came to my house, his face serious. He carried a folder thick with papers. Renate, he said gently, Max and Lena have filed a lawsuit. They're petitioning the court to declare you mentally incompetent. They want guardianship over your finances. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My knees gave out, and I sat heavily on the sofa. My own son wanted to take me to court, not to defend me, not to protect me, but to strip me of my freedom and hand my money to his greedy wife. Do you know what it feels like to realize your child is no longer your child, but a vulture circling your life? But I did not crumble. Oh, I cried that night, yes, I cried until my pillow was soaked. But when morning came, I dried my tears and told myself, no, Renate, you are not weak, you are not confused, you will fight. Mr. Weber arranged everything. He had me evaluated by Dr. Moore, a respected psychiatrist. She sat with me for hours, asking questions, giving me little tests, having me explain my finances, and even making me solve puzzles and recall dates. When she was done, she smiled and said, Mrs. Richter, your mind is sharper than many women 20 years younger. You're not only competent, you're resilient. Her words were a balm to my soul. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't confused. I had been beaten down by years of manipulation, yes, but I was still me, strong, clear, and determined. The day of the trial arrived like a storm. I wore my best black suit, the one I had saved for church, and stood before the mirror, looking at my own tired eyes. You can do this, I whispered to myself. You have survived worse. When I entered the courtroom, I saw them. Max in a brand new suit, Lena dressed in black like she was attending my funeral. Their lawyer was an older man with the smug air of someone who thought he'd already won. They didn't look at me with love. No, their eyes were filled with cold calculation. The trial began. Their lawyer painted me as a paranoid, confused old woman. He said I had suddenly cut off support, isolated myself, and fallen under the influence of outsiders. Lies, all lies. Then Lena took the stand. Ah, the performance! She wept, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, her voice quivering as she said, "Renate has always been like a second mother to me. Seeing her decline has been heartbreaking. We only want to help her. I wanted to scream, but I stayed quiet." Mr. Weber had told me, "Patience, Renate. Let them hang themselves with their own lies." Max was next. Hearing my son testify against me broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. He spoke of my strange behavior and my sudden hostility. He said I was being manipulated, that I wasn't capable of making rational decisions anymore. But when Mr. Weber Cross examined him, the truth began to shine through. Mr. Richter, he asked, "How much money has your mother given you in the past 3 years?" Max shifted in his seat. "I don't know exactly." Weber pressed, "Would $33.4 sound about right?" Silence. Max's face turned red. "And tell me," Weber continued, "how many times have you visited your mother without asking her for money?" Again silence. My son could not answer. The courtroom grew still. Then it was my turn. My legs trembled as I walked to the stand, but my spirit was steady. Mr. Weber guided me gently, letting me tell my story. I spoke of the years of support, of the sacrifices, of the secret wedding where I was told I wasn't special. I spoke of the break-in, the lawyer, the threats, and the manipulation. And then he asked me the question that mattered most. "Mrs. Richter, why did you stop supporting your son and daughter-in-law financially?" I lifted my chin, my voice clear. "Because I finally realized what I was giving wasn't buying me love. It was buying me servitude. They didn't love me. They loved my money, and I will not pay for love that isn't real." There was silence in the courtroom, heavy and thick. Even the judge leaned forward. When their lawyer tried to trip me up, asking confusing questions, I answered each one with calm precision. I spoke of my finances, my routines, and my independence. He wanted me to falter, to stumble, but I would not give him the satisfaction. At last Judge Miller gave his ruling. His voice was steady, but his words struck like thunder. "It is the judgment of this court that Mrs. Richter is in full possession of her mental faculties. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, it appears clear that this case was motivated not by concern, but by financial interest." Oh, child, I nearly wept with relief right there in the courtroom. I had not only defended my money, I had defended my dignity, my very identity as a capable woman. Max and Lena stormed out, faces twisted with anger. Lena's eyes burned with hatred, but I no longer cared. I had won. That night I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and for the first time in years I slept without fear. The battle had been fierce, but I had proven to them, to the judge, and most of all to myself, that I was not confused, not broken, and not incompetent. I was Renate Richter, and I was free. Ah, my dear, the day that judge banged his gavel and said those words, "A petition denied," was the day I was born again. I walked into that courtroom trembling, carrying the weight of humiliation, fear, and betrayal. But I walked out carrying something far greater, freedom. For the first time in years, I belonged to myself again. Do you know what that feels like, child? To have lived so long for others, every dollar spent, every step taken, every thought clouded by what will Max and Lena need next, and then suddenly you are free. I'll tell you, it feels like breathing fresh air after being locked in a cellar for years. It feels like sunlight pouring over your skin after living in shadows. When I left the courthouse, Mr. Weber patted my hand and said, "Mrs. Richter, you've not only won your case, you've reclaimed your life." And I knew he was right. The chains I had worn so long, chains of guilt and obligation, had fallen away. That very night I celebrated in the quietest way. I poured myself a glass of wine, put on an old record I hadn't listened to since my husband was alive, and I danced, low, creaky, stumbling steps, but with a heart that felt 20 years younger. For the first time in so long, I wasn't dancing for anyone else's approval. I was dancing for me. From that moment, I promised myself no more guilt, no more apologies, no more crumbs of affection bought with hard-earned money. My life, what was left of it, would finally be mine. So I began to live. First, I took myself to the beauty salon. Oh, child, it had been years since I'd let anyone fuss over me. I used to cancel appointments because Max and Lena needed something urgent. This time I didn't cancel. I sat in that chair while Cynthia, my hairdresser, worked her magic. She washed away not just the gray from my hair, but the heaviness from my soul. When she finished, she looked at me with surprise. Mrs. Richter, she said, "You look 10 years younger, but more than that, you look free." Then I bought a ticket. A real ticket just for me, not a bus pass to go deliver groceries for Max and Lena, but a ticket on a train to Vienna, a city I had always dreamed of seeing. I sat by the window as the countryside rolled past, and for the first time in decades, I wasn't thinking of anyone's bills or crises. I was thinking of art, of history, of the cobblestone streets waiting for me. Oh, Vienna was beautiful. I wandered through museums, stood in front of great paintings, and whispered to myself, "Renate, you've made it. You're here." I ate pastries without guilt, bought a little scarf in a color that made me feel alive, and sat in cafes where no one knew me, sipping coffee slowly, savoring every drop. And when I came home, I didn't stop. I dusted off my old paints, the ones I had shoved in the closet years ago, telling myself I had no time. I set up a little easel by the window, and I began again. The first strokes were shaky, my hands stiff, but soon the colors flowed. Reds, blues, greens, each one a declaration that my life had meaning beyond being someone's provider. Painting became my prayer, my therapy, and my joy. Do you know, my dear, how sweet it feels to spend money on yourself without guilt? To buy a canvas instead of sending rent, to buy a plane ticket instead of covering someone else's car payment. Every euro I spent on myself felt like a victory, like reclaiming pieces of my soul one by one. Of course, the ghosts of guilt tried to creep in. Sometimes, as I booked another little trip or bought new brushes, I would hear Lena's voice in my head. "At your age, you should be careful. You should be saving for us." But then I would shake my head and remind myself, no. I don't owe them my life. I owe myself these years I still have left. I traveled more, Paris, Florence, even a week by the sea where I sat with my toes in the sand, letting the waves wash over them. I painted sunsets and gardens, things that made me smile. I joined a small art club in town where I met women my age who, like me, had given too much of themselves away. Together, we laughed, shared stories, and cheered each other on. You see, my freedom wasn't just about money. It was about rediscovering who I was when I wasn't being drained, manipulated, or erased. I was Renate, a woman with dreams, with talents, with joy still left to live. And so, yes, the judge denied their request. I reclaimed my freedom. And now I live for myself, traveling when I wish, painting with colors that make my heart sing, and enjoying little pleasures without 1 ounce of guilt. Because I have learned, my dear, that the greatest gift you can give yourself in old age is not money or comfort. It is permission. Permission to live, to breathe, to enjoy, to be free. And that is exactly what I intend to do with whatever time I have left.